welcome to this edition of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Alex Savage Project back again. Fortunately, Jordan won't be coming on today. He'll come on Friday for the Bears preview, but we got a lot of things to talk about. Obviously, Giants lost to Pittsburgh Steelers 26-16, so we got to take away a couple of takeaways from that game, and I have a lot of my thoughts to discuss. And the Yankees play a 3-game set to wrap up their homestand with the Toronto Blue Jays. So let me give my evaluation on last night's game before I officially go and dip into my takeaways from last night in my notes. So there was a lot of things that I overreacted last night on the stream, but at the same time, you see a little bit of familiarity. There were times where the quarterback was being pressured, but the Giants lost to contain a little bit. I will say, though, as part of my takeaways, that the pass rush is actually doing better. They got 2 sacks on the offensive line. They had Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams come in for sacks, so that was a good thing. Aside from that, they did force pressure, did multiple looks and stuff like that, but I'll get into that. And I feel like yesterday was one of those games, it kind of felt like Dallas last year, when we faced them on Monday Night Football. Basically, if you don't remember that game, we got out to an early lead. I think it was like 10-3, and we ended up blowing it in the case of we let them score towards the end of the half and even after the end of the half going into the third and fourth quarters. Then what happened was we couldn't convert on offense and they started scoring points, and that's why the score was inflated more than it actually was, because you could say I think it was like 37-18 was the final score. And people are going to say, oh, well, the Giants got blown out. Well, watch the game and then you'll find out. Because score and stats, I've noticed, over the time and course of my sports, information and whatnot, of me learning stuff, that stats aren't always the key. It's film, it's watching the game, it's knowing what's happening. But anyway, Giants lost 26-16. That's my thing. So I'm going to go to the positives and the negatives, takeaways that I took away from last night. Obviously, I had the stream last night, and I was taking notes a little bit after and, during the stream. So, for the positives, we got off to a good start. Even though we went 3 and out, not necessarily 3 and out, but we went downfield a little bit. Then we had the delayed game to back us up for the punt, which actually was a good idea. What happened was Riley Dixon punted, Deontay Johnson called for a fair catch, and they muffed the punt. Giants recover inside the red zone. What the problem is that they couldn't convert at all, and instead they went for a field goal. So that happens. Then I'm pretty sure it came to a point where Pittsburgh went on the field again. Then they scored 3, and then we came back with an offensive drive, a touchdown from Daniel Jones, Darius Slayton. A lot of Steelers fans, including Sean on the stream, said that was a bad call on Evan Ingram. Not the OPI, but I'm talking actually more of like Joe Hayden holding him, and they said, oh, it's not PI. Well, I beg to differ just a little bit, but I wouldn't say it was PI. You could make more of a case for holding. But anyway, Jones to Slayton, the connection is there. Slayton had 6 receptions, 102 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He beat Steven Nelson on 2 touchdowns. Jones threw to him, of course, for those 102 yards. Obviously, everybody knows the connection is there. Sterling Shepard had a couple of receptions for like 40-something yards. And, I have another person on the offense, 2 people actually, who come in the negative, but we'll talk about that. Andrew Thomas, he had a decent game. I wouldn't say that he did, all pro, but he allowed 4 pressures. His run blocking along with the offensive line didn't necessarily, punch in together, and that's why we only got 6 yards on the ground from Saquon Barkley, but that's another takeaway. Daniel Jones, his pocket awareness has gotten better, no fumbles. We know TJ Watt likes to force the fumbles. We'll get to that, whatever happened in the negative parts. But, it seemed like everybody who's been looking at the stat sheet says, oh, Daniel Jones, he threw 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Oh, he's not that good. You know what? Look at the film and the game, then come back to the stats. Because Daniel Jones, believe it or not, other than a couple mistakes and those 2 interceptions, he had a great game yesterday. He really did. And if the offense and the offensive line would have stuck together, I think we could have beat the Steelers yesterday. I'm going to be honest. Good clock management in the case of that. It wasn't Pat Shurmur clock management. Like, it's not a huge takeaway because we were losing by a certain extent. In that case being like, last year at like 5 minutes, 4 minutes, or 3 minutes, Pat Shurmur would call a timeout before the 2-minute warning. Joe Judge and Giants didn't do that. So that's a positive on that side. Giants got 2 sacks from the pass rush, as I mentioned earlier. Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams came in there for the sacks. B.J. Hill helped out a little bit as well. Blake Martinez, I am so impressed with him so far. I know it's one game, but you saw him flying all over the field when it came to the running game, making tackles and whatnot. Blake Martinez actually got an 83 overall grade from PFF, and I don't rely on them often, and I know you're going to say, oh, well, he only relies on PFF when it supports his narrative. Well, sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I don't. That's mostly on the takes, though. So that's a different story. Bradbury had a decent game. James Bradbury, he got beat on a touchdown from Juju Smith-Schuster. He got beat on a Chase Claypool reception. Many have said that Claypool pushed off. I wanted Claypool, but that's a whole different story. And the other one I was pissed off about was when it was like 3rd and long and they blitzed. This was towards the end zone. James Washington had the touchdown, but the pick play happened. Jabril Peppers and I think James Bradbury ran into each other. I don't know which 2 defenders. I know Bradbury was one of them, but James Washington ran into the end zone for a touchdown. They eventually tried taking the lead at that point. I don't think they did, but that was because Chris Boswell missed the field goal. Limited Big Ben to 229 passing yards. That was surprising because I really thought that, at least in that point of the game, he might get 250. He might even get, 275, maybe 300 if the defense, kept screwing up a little bit, which wasn't that bad. I'll get into that a little bit. But we limited Ben to 229 yards, which is good. And we'll see how we do next week against Mitchell Trubisky. And we'll see how Big Ben does against the Denver defense that didn't do that bad yesterday. Derrick Henry went in spouts to win them the game, and Tannehill too. No surprise there. Let's go into the negatives. Now, the run game was absolutely atrocious. You could say, oh, it's a new offensive line, it's this, that, and the other thing. Bud Dupree had a lot of tackles for a loss, and I'm not going to blame it all on Saquon. I'm not going to blame it all on the offensive line because there were some formations where Bud Dupree was going to come around anyway. But there was one play last night where Saquon ran it to the right side, and Evan Ingram, he missed a block. We've been saying off season, he needs to improve his run blocking. Yeah, that didn't really help, He made a bad play there, and Bud Dupree, and I think it was TJ Watt, tackled him for a loss. And another thing Saquon needs to do, that's 2 things. Everybody's going to, hype around Saquon and feel bad for him because he got 6 yards. Yeah, I get that. But there was one play, I don't know if it was the specific play that I just mentioned. It was another play. He had really negative 1 yards in front of him, meaning that he was going to lose 1 yard because the offensive line wasn't blocking. He turned that into like -6. I'm going to be honest there. I'm not going to, cuddle Saquon, the offensive line was horrible. No. I'm not going to do that. Listen, I may not have, liked the Saquon pick at first and then I got used to him. But at the same time, you can't just sit there and say that he didn't make mistakes. Everybody made mistakes at least at some point in the game. Some point. And his pass protection, if everybody saw one of the last sacks the Pittsburgh Steelers got, was this one. It was when they sent a blitz. Devin Bush, I think, was on the left side, or maybe been to Bud Dupree, but I'm pretty sure it was Devin Bush. Hernandez had his guy. Bush went through the left side. Saquon got juked out by Bush, and Bush got to the quarterback. At least I think it was Devin Bush. That can't happen. Keep making excuses for Saquon, you do that. But right now, pass protection, we talked about this last year, against the Jets especially. Saquon cannot pass block. I'm sorry. He can run the football. Sometimes he has trouble creating holes that the offensive line doesn't give him. But when it comes to protection, pass protection, he sucks. I'm sorry. Unless he improves, I just feel that way about him. But also, on the coaches as well, even though they probably worked at it in the offseason, that Saquon probably is working on his pass protection and everything else. But at the same time, you have Deion Lewis, you have Wayne Gallman, who are 2 better running back pass protectors. Maybe Eli Penny, too. He's had a lot of lead blocks and stuff like that. But anyway, let's go to another negative takeaway. Offensive line gave up 3 sacks. So Cameron Fleming, he was a contributor in that fact. Obviously, I just mentioned the Saquon sack that he gave up to Devin Bush. Cameron Fleming gave up one to, I believe, Vince Williams to the right side, and that did not look good at all. Everyone wants to say, oh, he's a depth piece, he's an average. You know what? If you're going to help this offensive line and you're going to fill in at right tackle, at least play, sufficient. And, I get it. Oh, this is a rebuilding team. It's only 1 week. But you still have to point out the criticisms. I'm sorry. That's just the way it's going. One play, he was totally juked out by Vince Williams, as the sack I just mentioned. One play, he was totally juked out, and they got to the quarterback. 3 sacks we gave up. Saquon horrible in pass protection. I kind of mentioned that. Jones threw 2 picks. One was a good play by Watt. I can't even fault Jones that much, but at the same time, I think Bush was on Ingram, or maybe been Minka or Edmonds. That wouldn't have been a good throw either. I think Ingram would have dropped that, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. And the Hayward interception, he was trying to make a play, but I would have rather taken a sack on that one because Dupree was coming from behind. He hit him as he threw it, and an interception by Cam Hayward. And that ended up costing us because we were, I think, that whole drive proved to be a waste. Traveled down the field, and I guess it was just for yard purposes there. Evan Ingram. What am I going to do? I got the poster right behind me. What are we going to do? Capizzo always cheers me up after a Giants loss. Whether it's a win or loss, especially a loss because he always rants and I always find it funny. The memes aren't necessarily funny to me because I'm a Giants fan, but a couple others are. And I did laugh at some memes last night. Don't think I'm a salty person, whatnot, but I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But one of the plays Ingram screwed up on was the one near the goal line. That was much after the fumble recovery, and they were in the red zone. I don't know what happened there, miscommunication and whatnot, but everybody, seems to be blaming Daniel Jones. It's not his fault because TJ Watt was on him. TJ Watt was there, and Daniel Jones was rolling right. He was trying to find Ingram, but Ingram stopped and didn't run his route, and he ended up dropping it. PFF has ranked him the worst tight end in football. Not because of his pass receiving, but because of his run blocking as well. That's something we got to fix. I'm up to hype Evan Ingram, contract extension, this thing or that thing. But right now, game 1 didn't look so good. Game 1 did not look so good. Not targeted for most of the rest of game 2. They pretty much left him out of it. Levine Toilolo even got a reception. So did Caden Smith. Caden Smith actually got an 82 overall grade from PFF, which I'm surprised in, but I guess he had, somewhat of a decent game yesterday compared to the other tight ends. I know Toilolo got a reception, as I just mentioned, and Ingram didn't do so well. So, as far as the run defense goes, we stopped James Conner in his tracks. We did. He has an ankle injury. I believe he's going to be out for the next couple of weeks, or they're going to leave him day to day, week to week, whatever. But we pretty much stopped James Conner. From then on, we just pretty much closed the gaps in on him, and we got him. Unfortunately, when it comes to the rest of the game, or at least the second half, they put Benny Snell in. He got 113 rushing yards. This is from the outside, mostly outside runs. And 2 things I have to point out. Darnay Holmes missed an open field tackle, missed like 2 or 3. Unfortunately, Pro Football Reference hasn't uploaded the stats right now, so I can't really give them to you. I will probably next podcast episode, or maybe I'll do it in a video too, because I want to get those stats out to you guys, or maybe I'll do it through Twitter. I don't know, but I know a lot of you guys do not have Twitter. But Benny Snell pretty much destroyed us in the second half. Even though he didn't get a touchdown, the runs to the outside killed us. Jabril Peppers had trouble making open field tackles. I know he had the assignment of covering Eric Ebron in a couple plays. Ebron took advantage. We really limited Vance McDonald, which was, somewhat of a decent piece, but also, the other wide receivers were used. As I mentioned, Cameron Fleming did not have a good game. Peppers went out with an injury. I don't even know the status on that. Nobody has spoken of it unless he went back in the game and I didn't know about it. And Isaac Yiadom got beat badly twice. Once for a Juju touchdown, as everybody remembers. That actually was the one that actually, had it 9-10 and they missed the extra point. My bad. Going back to the early part in the video when I said, James Washington touchdown would have tied the game if they didn't miss the extra point. That was the one that took the lead for the Steelers. My bad. But I don't know what Yaidon was doing in the case of, covering Smith-Schuster on that play, but it seemed like he took a weird angle to the ball that really didn't work out for him because it was a touchdown. But at the same time, why would you have Yaidon covering Smith-Schuster? Unless he's in the slot, and I don't know. Coaches know something we don't. But at the same time, it's Isaac Yaidon versus Juju Smith-Schuster. Who's winning? Corey Ballantyne, another one. Started at cornerback 2. You cannot hide Corey Ballantyne for too long. And I know Bobby Skinner said this, and you could say, oh, he's copying off Bobby. No. It's true. You cannot hide Corey Ballantyne for too long. He was getting beat by Deontay Johnson. And that's unfortunate because I think a lot of Steeler fans and a lot of last season overhyped Deontay Johnson. He muffed the punt. And I know that's special teams, but I think a lot of people just overrate Deontay Johnson. And I could be wrong. I think James Washington can be definitely something special for them. Juju is already something special for them. Chase Claypool made a reception downfield. But as far as Deontay Johnson goes, I'm not really a fan of his. Maybe because he screwed me on fantasy team last year. But, that's a whole different ball game and a story. But you can't hide Ballantyne for too long. That's unfortunate. To be honest, I wasn't necessarily a fan of this Yaidon trade. This is 3 days before the cut, and you're literally trading for him when literally he's getting like 2 practices in, or not even 1, before you do cuts. So he's ultimately a make it for the roster. And I said that to Paul Dottino, and he pretty much said, yeah, they're trying out corners, they're evaluating. But if you look at his stats from the past 2 years, his rookie year was better than his sophomore year. Because his sophomore year, he allowed a 70% completion percentage for quarterbacks. And he gave up, I think, more touchdowns either in his second year or his first year. But he's a little bit undersized. I will say that. So, and I'm talking about Yaidon, of course. But Giants have to fix that up. Bradbury, he had his on and offs, but I really think he did a solid job. But as far as the rest of the secondary, Julian Love, where was he? I didn't really see a lot of stuff from him. Logan Ryan, he was used on multiple situations. Didn't see him a lot as far as making plays. Even though it's the first game, this is just the first game, guys. Don't, start screaming, oh, it's the first game. I know this. Jabril Peppers, as I mentioned, he struggled with tackling a little bit and covering, which is going to be a huge problem. I mean, I don't have the stats on you right now of how much Ebron got. But, the main point of this and the negatives, the Steelers ultimately made a lot of mistakes to where the Giants could have taken advantage. The muff punt, that should have been 7. The Daniel Jones interception, that should have been 7 or 3. We would have been back into the game and the score wouldn't have been so socially distanced. But my point is, Steelers made multiple drops. James Conner couldn't run through a hole, and the offensive line couldn't block against Blake Martinez and Dexter Lawrence and Dalvin Tomlinson. But ultimately, the theme of the game was don't beat yourself. And I get, the Giants are developing, new defense. Defense looked pretty good. And I'm going to say this, even though they gave up 113 yards to Benny Snell, I would say that they had a decent game compared to other games last season. The offense, as I mentioned, that's a whole different ballgame. But I read a tweet before the stream, or during the stream, that said, Jordan Ronan, tweeted it. He said, Joe Judge's main thing was we can't beat ourselves with mistakes. That's what we did here. We beat ourselves with mistakes. And unfortunately, that caught up to us. I get it's youth, it's chemistry and all that, but, the game was closer than the score said it was. Let's be honest. If you were watching the game and, you're going to start talking trash on the Giants, say, they lost to the Steelers. You know what? For a lot of Steeler fans and for a lot of Giant fans, don't overreact to this. I'm pointing out criticisms, but don't overreact to this like, it's another Giants season loser. Still have faith in your team because this is a young team. This is only week 1. You don't know your team till after week 4. Whether they're going to be an offensive team or a defensive team, passing team, running team, whatever. And everybody, wants to blame the offensive line for every single problem. Saquon, the box was filled. A lot of problems last year. We had a decent offensive line. Box was filled. What can you do? But that doesn't mean that players make mistakes and that's allowed. Not happening. But for the Steelers fans, on the other hand, I watched one of Ron Effect's videos. If you haven't seen him before, shout out to him. He's on YouTube. Go subscribe to him. He had a recap video on the Steelers-Giants game. So I commented, I said, I love how some Steeler fans think, they won the Super Bowl and everything. I didn't say Super Bowl, but I said how they think they won a playoff caliber team. Somebody said, no, we're just happy we won. Basically, what I'm pointing out is like the Steeler fans, and I'm not going to say this every time we lose because I know the circumstances. Congrats to Steeler fans, by the way, for winning. But at the same time, you're acting, a lot of Steeler fans are acting like they beat the best team in the league. And they didn't. And honestly, they might not even beat Denver next week because they put up a good competition to Tennessee. And we know that the Steelers like to play down in the competition. But as far as the negatives and the positives go, that's for the Giants. Anything else you could probably comment on my Twitter or everything. But I pretty much covered everything. As far as, that goes for the Giants messing up on multiple occasions. The positives and negatives are there. But just remember, this is only week 1. But a lot of people make excuses. They're like, oh, it's week 1. You don't need your team till week 4. I get that. And I said that in the video. But at the same time, you can't let the mistakes fall water under the bridge. I'm sorry. But, I think Joe Judge will actually take accountability this time and say, hey, we need to fix this, this, and that. And have, at least accountability for it and say, okay, my bad on this thing. Jason did this. He needs to clean up on that. Now where it's Pat Shermer, it's the same thing every time. So that's mainly my
Yankees
Giants
finally
sort
have
of
Giancarlo
recap
Stanton.
from yesterday.
They have
We
Gio
finally got to see the
Urshela
Giants,
and Jonathan
and they
Loaizaga
unfortunately
back.
lose. So now
They
we're
also
going
sent
into
down Miguel
Yankees
Andujar.
preview,
They
Blue
sent
Jays
down Mike
series,
Ford and Clark
and
Schmidt.
go over the problems.
So I have
and
some
everything
comments on that before we actually get into the stats, because that's what I'm going to do, before we get into the probables and the preview for this series, finishing out this homestand before they go away. So Miguel Andujar started heating up a little bit. As you guys remember, like when Urshela was injured and they called up Andujar again, his average was about, I would say, around 130, I would say. I don't have the definite number on me right now. His average now is at 242. That is much better than it was before. Even though it's like .100 and, 12 points, even though I wasn't exact with the 130, it's better than what he was hitting before. And he was on a hot streak for a while. And, with all the other hitters not producing before this 5-game win streak, he really helped the team. Defensively is a different story. Mike Ford, I don't have anything to say to him. He's just a clear disappointment. Clark Schmidt, I honestly don't want him to be a disappointment. And I feel like Boone just threw him out there whenever they didn't have bullpen depth or where the game was over. Like, they threw him out there when Deivi Garcia struggled, I think it was against the Orioles, and Clark Schmidt just gave up 4 more runs. He basically said, you know what, the game is over, so we're going to throw you into the game, and we don't care if you give up more runs or not. Did he say that? No. Do I feel like that's somewhat of the intention? Yes. Because Clark Schmidt is a very good prospect. He's impressed us all, but I think right now he needs to work on some stuff, definitely. But at the same time, the Yankees can't just sit here and waste him because he could be a long reliever or possibly a starter. So that's what I have to say on that. Giancarlo Stanton, Urshela, Loaizaga, welcome back. So before they went on the DL this year, here's Stanton's stats. He had 54 plate appearances in 14 games, along with 41 at-bats. He had 10 runs, 12 hits, 3 doubles, 3 homers, 7 RBIs, 1 stolen base. He had 10 walks, 11 strikeouts, and a .293 batting average. Also with a .453 on-base percentage and a .585 slugging. So now to go to Giovanni Urshela, who's made multiple defensive plays this season as much as he did last season. But also, times have changed in different aspects in different ways. So he played 31 games, 120 plate appearances, 103 at-bats, 18 runs, 28 hits, 7 doubles. He had 6 homers, 23 RBIs, 1 stolen base. He had 14 walks, 20 strikeouts, .272 batting average, .358 on-base percentage, and .515 slugging. So now Loizaga, obviously pitching, it's a different story. He was 2-0, 3.18 ERA. He had 8 games, 3 of them started. He also had 17 innings pitched, 14 hits, 6 earned runs, 3 homers, 4 walks, and 20 strikeouts, which is not that bad. He also hit 3 batters. Just for extra reference, Miguel Andujar, he, as I mentioned, started heating up a little bit. 21 games, 65 plate appearances, 62 at-bats, 5 runs, 15 hits, 2 walks, 1 triple, 1 homer, 5 RBIs, 3 walks, 9 strikeouts, 242 batting average, 277 on-base percentage, and also a 355 slugging. Now to go on Mike Ford, who's been a clear disappointment. Unfortunately, I like the guy, but he's not having a great season right here. 29 games, 84 plate appearances, 74 at-bats, 5 runs, 10 hits, 4 doubles, 2 homers, 11 RBIs, 7 walks, 16 strikeouts, and a 135 batting average, going along with a 270 slugging and a 226 on-base percentage. Now you go to Clark Schmidt, whose stats are much worse than Jonathan Loizaga's. 7.71 ERA in 2 games pitched, 2.1 innings pitched, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, and 3 walks, going along with 3 strikeouts, 1 hit by pitch, and 14 batters faced. So those 2 games, one was the Orioles game, and I think one was actually the Blue Jays game, where Adam Ottavino actually gave up that grand slam to Danny Jansen. He's still hitting in the 150s, so that didn't help him out much. But to go along with the probables for this series, for Game 1, it's going to be Deivi Garcia versus Taijuan Walker. Game 2, it's going to be Tanner Roark versus Garrett Cole, and Masahiro Tanaka versus Chase Anderson in Game 3. So take a look at their last time out. Deivi Garcia and Tanner Roark faced. Deivi Garcia had the win, 7 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 6 Ks, 1 homer, 95 pitches. His ERA is currently at a 3.06. Tanner Roark, he had 4 innings pitched, 2 hits, 2 runs, and 3 walks, 3 strikeouts, 2 homers, 68 pitches that start. So now to go to the last game where Garrett Cole pitched. He pitched against Alex Cobb. Complete game because it was a doubleheader. He had the win, 7 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts. That's the Garrett Cole we like to see. Completes games. That's his second completed game of the season, because the one game it was the Washington opener, and that was a rain delay, and unfortunately they called the game. Fortunately enough that we got the win, though. So Masahiro Tanaka, last start, 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 5 Ks, and 1 homer, 91 pitches, and a 3.16 ERA. Going back to Garrett Cole, he has a 3.20 ERA. So those 3 pitchers seem like, the top 3 in our rotation right now, compared to Paxton, who's still on the IL, and J-Happ as well, and any other guy, we go for number 5. So to go to really Chase Anderson, he didn't have a good start the last time out. I'll preview his stats right here. Okay, so when I was talking about the bad start for Chase Anderson, I was talking about the way he pitched against the Mets. The Mets won 18-1 against the Blue Jays. Though he only gave up 4 runs, he got the loss, and he pitched 2.2 innings pitched, 4 hits, 4 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 Ks, 1 homer, and 67 pitches. That's not very good, at least going through what he did. Going through the third with 67 pitches, that's not a good pitch count. Unfortunately, the offense and the bullpen didn't do any justice for him, so he's going to be looking for a redeemed start, a new start, a revenge start in a way, so that he could get back on the board. I think he actually pitched a couple of years ago for the Milwaukee Brewers, but go back to Game 1 where we're pitching against Taijuan Walker. Last time out against the Yankees, he had 4 innings pitched, 2 hits, 5 walks, 3 Ks, and 88 pitches. So the walks need to get under control for his part. But definitely right now it looks like the Yankees have an advantage in a way as far as the pitching goes, because all their pitchers won the last time out. The Blue Jays pitchers really didn't win the last time out. It was mainly Walker who had the most decent start out of all of them. Then Roark, I'm pretty sure he got the loss, or it was somebody else that got the loss. And then obviously Anderson's bad start against the Mets. But the Blue Jays definitely do have an advantage, being second in the AL East and a couple of games back. They're also ahead of the Yankees as far as seeding goes. So the Yankees are currently 7th when it comes to seeding in the American League. And definitely, if the Yankees don't want to be facing the Rays or any tough team like the White Sox, they need to do a lot better than what they've been doing the past couple of days, even though they're on a 5-game win streak. I'm not going to talk about Gleyber Torres being benched because it's turned into a very, very important situation now that he's dealing with a quad injury. So that's going to be tough for him. We'll see how long he's out. He's not expected to be out that long, but we'll see how long he is out. Although we are getting Giancarlo Stanton and the others back today. So it's a plus, then a minus comes later on. So we'll see what happens with Gleyber Torres, and we'll see what happens with all the other injuries and whatnot. But this is definitely a series that the Yankees need to, get a hold of, because they do face Toronto one more time. I forget if it's at the stadium. I forget if it's in Buffalo, but definitely they need to grasp their home field advantage here. And after this, they go out and play Boston on the road. And that's going to be tough. They actually, now that I see it, they play Toronto on the road. And then they finish out against Miami. There's only a handful of games left. I think it was yesterday. There's 13 games left. So if I take a count, probably between 10 and 15 games left. For the Yankees, at least. I don't know whether, double headers are going to happen and whatnot. But this is a series where the Yankees need to take advantage. Miami is an up-and-coming team. Pretty much like Baltimore. Boston's just drowning at the bottom of the swamp of the AL East. And Toronto's, second place team in the AL East. So right now, Yankees need to take advantage of this. I know I don't do a lot of, stats when it comes to these Yankees previews. But right now, it's very imperative that they win this series. So that is pretty much it for this podcast episode. I know it was a little bit long, but it's for you guys, it's for the information. Thank you guys for supporting. Podcast available on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all the other podcast platforms you could find us on. Follow our social media pages at Big Blue in the Bronx, Twitter, and Instagram primarily. We will post updates every time we do an episode or something happens with the Giants and the Yankees. Of course, Giancarlo Stanton, as I told you guys on this episode, is coming back along with Drew Urshela and Jonathan Loaizaga. I'll tell you my thoughts, obviously, on Twitter, about something or something else. But we will see you on Friday. Hopefully, the Giants can win next week, but we'll put more emphasis on that on Friday for the Bears preview. Thank you, guys, and we will see you on Friday.